Welcome to the regular Shelburne Selectboard meeting, Tuesday, March 10. I'm Lee Crone, Town Manager. I'll only be in this seat very briefly while we begin the first meeting of the new season, welcoming our new Selectboard member, Kate Lally. And we'll start off by reviewing and hopefully approving the agenda, if you please.
Move to approve the agenda for the Select Board meeting on March 10th, 2020.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Any questions or concerns? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The agenda is approved. We'll move right into the organizational meeting, and the first item on that would be to elect a new chair for the year to come.
I'll move to nominate Jerry Story to serve as Select Board Chair for a term beginning this evening and ending on the first Select Board meeting after town meeting 2021.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Chair, I will yield the seat back to you.
You, for the record, I abstained.
Well, at least you didn't vote no.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. The next item is to nominate and elect a vice chair. I'd like to nominate Jamie.
I'll second that nomination.
Mary seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay.
I will abstain.
And Jamie abstains. Thank you. The next series of items are housekeeping in a sense. Do you want to assist us with the confirmation of regular meetings and accounts payable and newspaper record? So,
Sure. So these are a series of items required by state statute at the organizational meeting each year. They tend to stay the same. It asks that the Select Board designate its regular meeting dates or days and times and locations, which presumably would remain the same, second and fourth Tuesdays at 7 p.m. here at town offices. Accounts payable and payroll warrants, typically that's a matter that's shared among the board over the calendar year, and typically you figure out which months work for you, and each of you takes your turns on that. Designating a newspaper of record, typically the Select Board's newspaper of record is the local paper, the Shelburne News, for our legal warnings that may need to happen. Adopting rules of procedure, we've got a set that we've used that may be considered acceptable to continue for the year to come. And then appoint the tree warden, which is an annual appointment, and David Hall has served, in my opinion, admirably in that position, and he's willing to serve again.
would you like us to confirm by vote the
So we could do...
meeting? You want to start with the meeting schedule?
Sure.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I would move to confirm a schedule where the Select Board would regularly meet on the second and
And
fourth
fourth.
Tuesday of every month, beginning at 7 p.m. in the evening, and at such other times as the Select Board may require.
In room one.
And,
In here, in town offices,
and room one up at the town offices, thank you.
unless otherwise
Thank you,
noticed.
Mary. Mary moves.
Second.
Jamie seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
As far as the warrants go, again, typically you've worked it out among yourselves. I mean, each of you handles some portion of that over the course of a year, and you just figure out at some point which months work best.
My only request on this, and I know Peter's tremendous on coordinating this all with us and chasing us when we're delinquent in coming in, but a schedule, a calendar up front would be helpful.
Yep.
For me, so if we could just make that ask tonight for
Right.
April, until next April,
Yeah.
March, whatever, just to give us
Yeah.
Yeah,
some
none
and
of
the
those-
ability to
there's
move
a
things
problem, we
around
can
as
switch
needed.
around.
Right, yeah,
Right.
board.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I've never known ahead of time until I get an email from Peter, which isn't a problem, but I did have the sense at one point everyone conspired to have me do it more often, it seemed.
We voted on that when
Yeah.
you weren't here.
We gave you all the vacation. Yeah, I think that'd be helpful, Lee, because then some of us who can sit in
Sure.
will know and will be available,
Yeah.
so.
Suppose I should have asked in advance if there were months that you knew in advance were better than others, or one might be out of state for a time. So Peter and I will work to circulate a calendar that works for you
Okay.
and juggle that around.
So there's really no
So-
action to take here, except we will defer to you two to,
We'll put a calendar together and
Put a
bring it back
calendar
to your
together and
next
come back.
meeting to
yeah.
clarify.
All right, the designation of newspapers of record.
Should be the Shelburne News typically.
And I think that works well for us, given our meeting schedule and the need. We have limited need for notices ahead of time because we don't have that many hearings. And I do believe the Shelburne News is an appropriate record for our meetings.
And we do use that as well for notices of taxes being due or licensing or other local needs.
And where we do, should we have, we would go to a daily, right?
If there were a need
Do a
for it,
regional
but typically
daily.
we would use the weekly, yes.
Yeah. All right,
Do we need a motion
So-
for that? or
need a
is it
motion to direct you
Yeah,
as
it'd be good
such?
for the record. I know it seems
Okay.
repetitive.
Move to designate the Shelburne News as the newspaper of record for purposes of Shelburne Selectboard notices.
Jamie moves,
Second.
Mary seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Lee has provided us the proposed rules.
Yeah, we had distributed one set in advance, thinking there might need to be one paragraph that might be deleted, which I've then come to learn is actually separate. And there was some thought about adding a section toward the end. I've given you a new version, which is the same as the existing version. It seems that that has served the board well and could likely serve again. If there's a need to change it, it's an easy thing to do. It's not an ordinance or something that requires significant process to change.
My observation was at 15, while it was duplicative of the old, it was a 16 in the old 15, it was, however, at your initiative, Mary, that we put this new 15 in, and for some reason, that didn't survive a change over the period of the year, so we were all agreed on the 15, and I think this statement, it seemed to me that you included regarding commissions was well said, and,
With regard to advisory?
advisory committees.
Yeah, and my question there was, if we now know that select board members can't serve officially on other committees, do we need that statement? Board members could still be a liaison informally, reporting to the board, being the board's expert on various topics, but if board members can't serve elsewhere,
Respecting the charter.
then I'm not sure we need that
Yeah, I
additional
agree,
statement.
and I think the wording is a little problematic, because it conflicts a little with the town charter, because the first clause says, if a select board member serves on another municipal advisory committee, comma, well, that should never happen.
Which itself is
Right,
prohibited,
itself,
yeah.
right.
So I'd actually distributed a new version that
Oh,
deletes that,
oh,
Say I didn't do that.
keeps it the
So we're just
same,
silent
Okay.
on that.
Yeah.
keeps it the
Yeah.
same as the current rules
Yeah.
for now.
Okay,
So effectively, we're making no changes to
Correct.
Yeah.
current rules. Which, I mean, one observation I made to Lee was the fact that I haven't had to pick this up in a year is somewhat reassuring and a good sign that things are working well collaboratively.
or we're doing it all wrong.
Or that,
No,
and no one's called us out yet.
no,
No one knew. We'll find out soon enough.
yeah,
If I could, I just wanted to make a point around 9, that we've made it a standard to vote on changing agenda items, but it also accounts for time allotted. And sometimes I think it's helpful if we don't spend as much time as we sometimes do going over on agenda items. I might, just as a reminder, kind of bring that up. Can
Thank
we
you,
vote
Mike.
on a time constraint on items? So one thing I'm hoping we can do is really work on keeping our agenda to the time allotted. Try to be done when we say we're going to be done, with gentle reminder. I need them too, but I'd really like to, if we're gonna,
Yeah, good point.
if we've allotted a certain amount of time and we can't do it in that time, let's remind ourselves.
Good point, Mike. Any further discussion? Kate?
No, I have nothing to add, thanks.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt?
I move to adopt the Shelburne Selectboard Rules of Procedure as they are in place from our prior year.
I'll second that.
Mary moves, Mike seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And the last item is to appoint a tree warden. We've mentioned David Hall.
Yes. He's done well by the town. He is willing to serve another year.
Great.
He knows
terrific.
his business.
Move to appoint David Hall as Shelburne Tree Warden effective this evening.
Jamie moves to,
It's a one-year appointment.
Yes, it is.
Jamie moves to appoint David.
Second?
Kate seconds. Any further discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, seeing no hands, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Well, thank you very much. The next item is to approve meeting minutes of February 25, 2020. That will involve the three of us, Mary, Mike, and myself. Is there a motion to that effect?
I would so move.
Mary moves.
I'll second.
Mike seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none. The three of us approving them will please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and one will abstain for reason of not having been present, and Kate will not be voting for reason of not having yet been a member of our team.
It looked like one big party that night when I watched some of the meeting online. It's somewhat lonely up here with two people. Yeah. So I'm sorry for missing it.
So the next item are public comments. Would anyone wish to make them?
Would,
Sir?
thank you. I'm going to be dropping off some things with the town clerk tomorrow to file with the town. Is it okay to give you a copy each before I do that?
The first thing I'd like you to do is introduce yourself and your name. And it is our protocol, I'm sure you recall, that we would only entertain comments on matters that are not on the agenda.
Not on the agenda.
So would you describe what that is so that
Yes,
we're...
sir. My name is Anthony Sedita of Shelburne. These are comments relating to Article 22, which is the Planning Commission submission of the amendments to the form-based zoning overlay.
Okay?
A copy of that. This is going to be on file with the town tomorrow. I'll drop it off with paper and
Thank you.
electronically. Thank you.
And given that the public doesn't know what this is, maybe
I will read
when
the
you get a
first cover
chance,
letter just to explain.
would you describe what you've provided us?
Absolutely, I will.
Thank you.
for the opportunity. Okay. I'm going to read you what I have here, and then you can ask any questions afterwards, but I think it's pretty straightforward. As a concerned resident of Shelburne,
You'll have to pardon my grotesque interruption.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you say you're going to read this,
No, just
You're
the,
not
just
proposing
the
to
first
read.
3 paragraphs.
okay, thank
Is
you.
that, yeah.
I know I'm being rude, but...
No. That's for you to read, but I'll explain. Just bear with me.
Thank you.
I know usually it's 3 minutes is the maximum, so I'll
Thank
stay with well under. As a concerned resident of Shelburne, I'm bringing to the Select Board's attention a violation and misrepresentation in that Article 22, which was submitted for consideration by the Planning Commission on October 10th, 2019, as a proposed amendment, directly carries out a specific proposal for a planned community facility. This is a direct violation of the Planning Commission reporting form for municipal bylaw amendments, form-based zoning. Please find attached with this notice of reported town misconduct 25 evidence-based exhibits labeled A through X. 16 exhibits are Dean Pierce's publicly requested emails regarding the Champlain Housing Trust building proposal at the former Champlain Lanes bowling alley property. 5 exhibits are official town documents, and 4 are video references to previously recorded Planning Commission and Select Board meetings. I'm requesting that these exhibits are entered into the town record and that the misconduct being reported receives a full and complete investigation. These exhibits are documentary evidence demonstrating that both Dean Pierce and Dean Pierce, who is the Shelburne Director of Planning and Zoning, and the Planning Commission made specific zoning regulation changes to Article 22 that were created specifically to address the current non-compliant zoning requirements of the project architects Tyler Scott, builder J.L. Davis, and Champlain Housing Trust Organization. The Article 22 form-based zone changes requests were made as concessions to the proposed project in lieu of any building applications, forms, waivers, or variances submitted by the Pecor family, Scott and Partners Architects, J.L. Davis Builders, or the Champlain Housing Trust. The revisions made to the form-based zone amendments were made by request from those parties in both email communications and at the Planning Commission meeting on May 23, 2019. The revisions made to the form-based zone amendments directly benefited and accommodated the design plans proposed at the May 23, 2019 Planning Commission meeting for the affordable housing project at the former Champlain Lanes Bowling Alley property located at 2630 Shelburne Road. Should the town determine that these accusations to be found both true and evident, the entire form-based Article 22 amendments should be received null and void. Ladies and gentlemen, what you have on the rest of that paper are all of the pieces of evidence that I've collected that directly speak to changes to the amendments being made for the sole benefit of an architect, a builder, and a property. Any questions while I'm up here?
Thank you, Anthony. My expectation is that we have not obviously had an opportunity to review this, and that questions would be dependent upon at least a reading amongst ourselves and consultation with the town manager. So,
Fair enough. I spent a lot of time putting this case together. Everything is self-explanatory. Anybody's welcome to call me with any questions, but I've uncovered that when the changes to the amendment were being made, they were specifically made with a project in mind, and there's enough evidence in here, overwhelming evidence in both emails that undeniably speak to that from both the planning commissioner, dean, as well as the builder and the architect. So I will follow up with you guys and see what the next steps are. Thank you.
I want to let you know that I did read all of your emails that
Thank you.
were forwarded, paid attention to them. And the only reason I didn't respond is because I don't know the context in which this will come before us, if it'll be in a judicial kind of capacity. And also, I am always concerned about violations of open meeting law, rules and regulations.
Absolutely.
But I just want to let you know I did read them and pay particular attention to them.
Okay, and just so you know, Exhibit K within your packet is the Planning Commission reporting form for your municipal bylaw amendments. That was the form-based zoning communication that was prepared by the Planning Commission and submitted to you on October 10th, 2019. And that is Exhibit K. And on the third page of that exhibit, there is a clause in it that says the proposed amendment does not directly carry out specific proposals for any planned community facilities. What am I saying? What I'm saying is that Article 22, with those form-based revisions in it, directly does carry out plans for a specific proposed community facility. And the evidence to support that is within the rest of the exhibits in your packet. Thank you.
Michelle will be responding to you. We appreciate the effort you've gone to. Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment? Hearing none, seeing no hands. Next item is our select board comments. Mike?
I just wanted to thank everybody for a fantastic town meeting and a great election. I was really impressed with everything, and I was really impressed with the quality of our candidates, and I'm very happy to have Kate on board. I think it's going to be a great team. I also just wanted to give a heads up. I know everybody's been waiting for Philosophy Week. It is coming back. March 26th through April 4th. Stay tuned. There'll be a whole bunch of philosophy talks, and I'll be sponsoring one at the Vineyard on conservation ethics for small towns.
Nice.
So I invite
When's
everybody
that?
to come. The 4th, Saturday.
Great.
Yeah, I'll send out some advertisements.
Same. I just wanted to welcome Kate on board. And we did have a great town meeting and heavy turnout election. And I was also pleased to see so many people running for that seat. It's a testament to the vibrancy of our town that people want to be involved. And I was very pleased to see that, and very pleased to welcome Kate on board. I also just saw something, and I'll plug this for Shelburne Vineyard. When I walked in, they're having pie for breakfast on Saturday. If anyone like me loves pie for breakfast, I'll see you there.
It's a wonderful event and fundraiser. I went last year. It was a lot of fun. Highly recommended.
Oh,
Is it a whole pie?
well, Gail's going to fill us in.
It is a Rotary-sponsored event, so
Okay.
it's all about people from town.
Great.
Thank you, Gail. Kate, would you like to comment?
No, I'm just very glad to be here and excited to be a member of this board, and I'm gonna, got a bit of a learning curve in front of me, so I'm gonna mostly observe, I think, certainly this meeting.
Jamie?
I'll echo the sentiments from my colleagues. I'd like to welcome Kate. This is a bit of a reunion for us. We served on the Planning Commission for many years together, so looking forward to working with you again. And all the candidates for that seat were very impressive, so thank them all for running. And I had a chance to say some thank yous to Diana and her team a couple days ago. They did a tremendous job, and there are a few more elections to go this year, so they're gearing up now for the next one.
Primary in August and then
Yep.
the election
November.
in November.
Big one, November, yeah. Thank you. Well, Kate, we can't be any happier. We absolutely welcome you. We're delighted you're here.
Thank you.
I too would want to thank Diana and Lisa and Susan of that office, as well as lots of volunteers, some of whom serve on the BCA, for all of the effort that was made for what was a very efficient and election, and more than a trial run for November, which promises to be even more, involve even more voters. We thank you very much for all that effort. As well, Lee is going to follow with some specific comments about the virus. It has to be on all of our minds at this point. I'm told late this afternoon that Middlebury College is going to close its doors for at least some period of time in response. The town has a role to play. We're not going to either shy from that, nor are we going to take on more responsibility than we deserve or that we can enact. But we think in some conversations that, again, Lee is going to be much more specific about, we certainly can spend some time with education, and we'll be trying over the next period of time at opportunities of public meetings especially, to try to be as educational as we can about the risks and what you can do to minimize those. We're proposing even the possibility of a town open house to involve our rescue service and others who have some expertise, as well as many residents who are quite expert in this whole area. So we encourage everybody who may be home watching to be very, very careful, and at this moment, Lee is probably going to follow with some specifics.
Thank you. So I just wanted to two things tonight. One, yes, there's a new virus out there. We're all painfully aware of it, but to date, its effect has been far, far less than the regular flu that many, many thousands of people have been affected by or even died from. Something we have to be aware of, but not necessarily alarmist about. We are monitoring the situation very carefully and regularly. Been in contact. We hosted a meeting last week with the municipal managers around the county just to talk about what are the towns doing, and to put together a mutual aid compact between municipalities for all essential services, just as we have had for many years in the fire service. So if hypothetically one town's entire wastewater crew got sick, The wastewater plant still needs to run. Every municipality with a plant has licensed operators, and hopefully we could share resources and help us all keep essential services going forward. We're also having a roundtable meeting next week with emergency management directors and health officers, again, to share information and just to keep information flowing. We've involved the League of Cities and Towns. They came to that meeting last week with the managers. So we're monitoring it. We're coordinating with everyone we need to, including the schools, because we want to have a consistent approach to things. The last thing we want is one arm of the town closing something down and another arm of the town continuing to hold events. We'll do our best to keep everyone informed. Everyone knows where to find me. Feel free to ask questions anytime if you feel a need to know more. In the meantime, the best source that seems to exist in the state of Vermont is healthvermont.gov, which is the state of Vermont's Department of Health website. And as you can see, the main banner link on top of their page relates to coronavirus, and they are updating that daily with new information, again, coordinating with schools and other essential services. As the chair mentioned, Middlebury announced this afternoon they're going to close early for spring break and not reopen, run all their classes remotely. Harvard, I think, was the first to announce that. Since then, about half a dozen other colleges and universities are taking similar steps. Again, trying not to be alarmist, but as you might imagine, with students coming literally from all over the world, if you bring everyone together, they're all living in close quarters in dorms and apartments, probably not a great strategy right now. So the goal is limiting the spread of the virus. So glad to answer questions at any time about that. The other piece I wanted to use as an opportunity to tout this service. We've talked about this at previous meetings. The state of Vermont has a free alert service called VT Alert. Shelburne and other municipalities are a part of that service. You can sign up for free. You can tell it how you'd like to receive alerts, whether by text, by phone call, by email, and you can tell it what kind of alerts you'd like to receive. They may be an accident on Interstate 89 and you'd like to know, don't get stuck in traffic on the interstate. Could be an Amber Alert, could be a water line break. We need to shut things down in a part of town for a while. But the state is also using VT Alert to just push out new information as it arises. So I encourage everyone to sign up for it. Again, you don't have to receive all the alerts if you don't want. I get them all because I find it helpful for situational awareness, but you may just be concerned about one topic. Again, it's a free service. You can tell it what you'd like to receive and you can bail out at any time. So
The town has an emergency management plan. So we have, as an organization, we have a context in what to do under certain catastrophic situations. This could evolve to a catastrophe easily enough. And it's interesting that it puts in a very bright light the great distance there is for a town and its town office between it and the cloud, because so much of what we do is hands-on and face-to-face. So it generates a lot of thinking on our parts as to what our future looks like. It's a hard way to perhaps have to think about a cloud future, but you can be assured that in the town we're thinking and doing as we can in everything from what happens if too many people of the rescue squad can't perform and what do we do, to what are we learning here about what functions of the town should be cloud and not town office, not bricks and mortar office. And we welcome everybody's ideas and input, questions. We'd like to be a little bit of a clearinghouse for the community. We're not pretending to expertise, but I think Lee is demonstrating we do have a pretty good handle on where you can get expert help and advice, and we're very ready to enable that. So if you have questions, please let us know. We'll help where we can, and we'll keep you posted.
Indeed we will. We're also meeting with department heads in the very near future just to talk about a continuity of operations plan and how will we keep essential services going for the town, and which services, if things got really bad, which might have to be let go for a while, which can't stop. So again, we'll keep everyone informed as best we can.
Thank you.
And that's
Thank you, Lee.
my report for the evening. Thank you.
Any questions? Any discussion? The next item is to welcome a new business. Tracy is with us of Arabesque, and we welcome her and her business. Would you like to give us a few?
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Lee. And it's actually no longer Arabesque.
Oh, okay.
My name is Tracy Stolise, and I have a business called Shelburne Gift Company, which is located directly across from the old Sirloin Saloon, Shelburne Steakhouse building with the bright green awning. It used to be a yarn shop. And what we are doing in there is that we design, create, and deliver custom gifts and stationery for weddings, events, and corporate clients. So on the wedding side of things, we design and create welcome gifts, baskets, boxes, wedding invitations, all of the paper accessories. So that might be menus, place cards, printed napkins, things like that. We also do corporate gifts, so client appreciation gifts, employee appreciation gifts, welcome gifts for conferences and workshops and things like that. The other thing we have going on in our space is called the Vermont Wedding Studio, which is a co-working and meeting space for people in the wedding industry. There are a lot of them in Vermont, and a lot of them are working solo at home and often needing space to meet with couples. Maybe it's for a consultation. Lately, we've been getting a lot of cake bakers who are doing cake tastings in our studio, because you don't really walk into Starbucks for a meeting with your own cake and meet with a bride and groom. So we also, we have desks available for monthly and daily rentals. And let's see, as you alluded to, I previously owned Arabesque, which was a gift and stationery store next to Harrington's. I had that business for 10 years and just got to the point where I needed a little more flexibility in my schedule, because my husband and I also own another business together, which is that we put on the Burlington Wine and Food Festival. So if there are any wine and food lovers, we invite you to join us June 27th down in Waterfront Park. And I look forward to meeting more of you. I really have enjoyed having a business in Shelburne for all these years, and look forward to many more. So thank you again for having me.
And thank you. I think some of us might miss the fact that every once in a while a renovated John Deere tractor showed up in that lot. And
Is that right?
that I would stop and give it a good look over, you know, as if it could ever find a home, you know, on my account. But we're certainly very happy to travel back and forth and see you there. And we appreciate you taking the time to come and fill us in.
Well, thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Tracy.
Tracy.
Now, the next item is the town manager report. I
We
kind of,
lost,
We lost the Josephs.
yeah.
I'm not sure you have anything more.
Yep. Well, maybe we should try to dial them back in if we lost them.
Did we lose?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Excuse us a second.
One of the principles, for those of you who may be wondering on what might be item 11 on the agenda
Okay,
is
here we go.
this gentleman here.
I think we lost you, but we're back. Charles?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't know nothing, but we're here. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sorry about that.
I'm all set other than the next item.
Next
Let's be
item.
doing personnel.
Update the personnel policy regarding vacation time earned.
So from time to time, we take a look at the variety of responsibilities and benefits offered to various categories of staff. We have 2 collective bargaining units and we have non-union staff. It's impossible to make those responsibilities and benefits identical because some of the jobs are radically different than others. But one element that stood out to me was that for longer-term employees, those with 10 or more years of service, The collective bargaining agreements both offer those employees 15 hours of vacation per month, and the non-union employees get 13.2 hours per month. And again, although we can't harmonize these precisely for any number of reasons, it seemed like it might be something that would be fair and reasonable to harmonize this particular aspect and change the personnel policy to make that vacation earned at 15 hours per month for employees with 10 or more years of service to match the collective bargaining agreements.
I don't have any problem with that. Have you analyzed, Lee, if that is going to create any sort of staffing problem or unanticipated costs for the town?
Always an important and good question. Clearly, anytime someone earns vacation time, they're not here. During my tenure here, anytime someone's been on vacation, they've always made sure someone else was going to be here. An entire office was never vacant
Right.
simultaneously.
Thank you.
The more critical elements are, for example, in the police department, where there has to be a minimum level of staffing. In other offices, at least here in this building, if someone's not here, someone else can carry the freight. But that's one place. Certainly water and wastewater, they need to have their minimum services. And highway. And some departments can't take vacation at certain times of year because they have to be on call. For example, highway, they can't take vacation in the winter. They need to be here. But I'm not aware of any other problems this would
Does
create.
this require a vote from us to update the policy?
I believe a vote to amend the personnel policy, if we choose to move forward with that, would be appropriate.
I'm certainly in favor of it.
And approximately how many employees would this apply to for that tenure?
A
Makes
fair
sense.
number. I don't have that exact number, but we have a fair number of
2 dozen or more.
experienced employees.
Oh, I'm sorry, just,
But
Are we gonna move?
Well, I'm waiting
I
to
guess
see if
it-
there's any more comment.
any more discussion?
I guess it makes sense. My only comment is, if we anticipate additional changes, does it make sense to sort of look at them collectively instead of just one-off? But it's hard to sort of just park it and wait, not
Yeah.
knowing. So I'm
Was there
comfortable
an
moving
issue that
forward with
brought
it. It
this?
seems reasonable and equitable, and you're never
No.
going to get it on par
Right.
across all the.
no, it's just something that I noticed. We're in the midst, no secret, of
Right.
reviewing the police department's union contract. So as I look at theirs, look at the other union, look at the personnel policy to see, comparing requests to what exists elsewhere. So this one just stood out to me. Not a requirement that we do it. We are very generous in our collective package of benefits. If we did approve this, my suggestion would be to make it effective as of April 1, so there doesn't have to be going back in some period of time and recalculating prior earnings.
And unlike the police and the town offices, when somebody's going to take a vacation, they just make sure that there's going to be coverage. We're not paying overtime necessarily. Perhaps we might if, for example, Paul took a vacation and there weren't enough people to do whatever was needed to happen. Maybe somebody would work overtime, or maybe the wastewater department, maybe. But this isn't a kind of issue. I mean, one issue that we all saw, and it's a vexing problem, with the police department, there always has to be someone on duty, and when someone takes a vacation, you're usually paying someone overtime to fill that spot. But in this circumstance, with the increasing vacation time for town employees, I don't think it's going to create that problem.
And this would apply essentially to all non-union employees who typically are not in an overtime situation.
Okay, thank you. That being the case, I would move to amend the town policy to allow employees with 15, is it? Or
It's
5?
More than 10 years of service?
10 years of service, to have 15 hours of vacation time a month.
To approve 15 hours per month.
Yeah.
Effective on April 1.
Effective April 1, yes, thank you, Lee.
Mary moves adoption is presented to take effect April 1, 2020. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mike seconds. I think Jamie made, as a matter of discussion, Jamie made a very good point, but I do think this was conspicuous. This difference in, from staff to staff really, was a bright one. I mean, it was kind of obvious. So, but I do think Jamie makes a good point that were other changes to be anticipated or imagined, and we have some personnel actions to be taken in finance, for instance, some restructuring this year, and it may be well that we should gather those up at some point and enact an adoption that includes a number of them. So I think it's a good point. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you, Lee. The next item is to update Select Board Policy, also, in this case, regarding waiver of penalty for late payment of taxes.
So this is an interesting one that came to light. It has traditionally been the Select Board's practice to entertain and review all requests for waivers of the penalty for late payment of property taxes. We've had a case where we had to examine things a bit more closely, and it turns out that under state statute, that would typically fall solely to the Board of Civil Authority. However, our charter allows the Select Board to consider these requests, but it has very specific language, and it speaks to for tax payments that have only been received no more than 7 days late after a due date. And we weren't collectively aware of that very strict time frame in that, and that otherwise the Board of Civil Authority has statutory authority to review these. So the proposed update to the policy just clarifies more clearly, that's redundant. It clarifies that 7-day window, and after that, it makes clear that any such requests have to go to the Board of Civil Authority. It's a peculiar circumstance because many people don't even know they're late till they may get a letter from me in my role as tax collector a month or more after. But there are cases where somebody may have put it in the mail and it didn't quite get here, but it's postmarked and we count postmarks. Or they drop it in the police box at 12:05 by their clock, but it's actually the next day and they thought they were on time, but it's 5 minutes late. So there will be some cases where the Select Board will still have these. There may be more that have to go to the Board of Civil Authority, which is a more complicated, more formal procedure, but that's what statute requires. We're just looking to clean this up, basically.
What, I guess I'm just going to ask, why have two bodies ruling on these? Is there a benefit to just having the Board of Abatement rule on all of these? I don't quite understand the history.
Go to them directly
with what's
rather than-
special about 7 days. I guess I forgot, and I can run in here and there might be a Select Board meeting within a week. I'll take advantage of that, but
Well, it's in the
it
charter.
seems like just for uniformity procedurally and how the applications are reviewed, there might be some benefit to just having one board review it, but maybe not.
No, it would certainly be cleaner for everybody to have one board, whether this board or the BCA. It would require a change to the charter, which, as you know, requires going to the legislature as well. So it's not like our own ordinance we can just change. So at this point, the charter says up to 7 days late comes here, but we now know statute would otherwise rule and send it to the BCA. If we want to change that, we can start that process, but it will require an act of the legislature to approve that, whichever way we wanted to go. You could keep them all here, you could send them all
Does the
there.
charter say it must come to the Select Board, or does it give that as sort of an additional
It speaks,
review board?
it speaks specifically to the Select Board reviewing these.
Okay.
But it's a shall.
So it's not,
Yeah, it's charter.
it's not you can, but
Yeah.
it could. It's in the charter that up to
You
7
shall.
days comes here.
It's very interesting. I mean, de facto, it seems it should go to the Board of Abatement.
Right.
And in de facto, it seems that it will, unless somebody can figure out how to get the 7-day
Well, it's when if the payment
Payment
is
is
received
late.
up to 7 days late,
Oh, I
not
see.
just if we're meeting within
I
7
see.
days.
Right, yeah.
So again, if somebody drops it in the box down at the dispatch at 12:10 in the morning and it should have been there at
Right, I see.
11:59,
Yeah,
Then it's, and
It
they
would be-
appeal it, then it's for us to,
because it was
Select board.
within the 7-day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
For those of you who are close observers of town process, the explanation here is pretty simple. This has been a long-standing practice that predates all of us here, and we're not offering any explanation other than the fact that we thought this is what we did. As homegrown as that sounds, that's about it, gang. So it was brought to our attention, and this is a correction through a policy statement as well as your hearing through our routine. So my sense of it is it's governed by charter. The timing is a function, as Mary has indicated, of not so much of our meetings, which would be inefficient. It would seem to be terribly more efficient if the Board of Abatement did all of it as a routine, no doubt.
they might not agree.
But they might not be lining up ready to, themselves. But
ironically,
Yep.
all of us are on the board of
yes,
civil authority.
we comprise part of the Board of Abatement. So.
it is the Board of Civil Authority.
I'm sorry, it's the Board of
Yeah.
Abatement.
It's the Board of
Slightly
Abatement,
different.
Yeah.
which is
Which is
constituted as part of.
a companion unit, yeah.
Yeah.
Kate, did you know when you signed up all these boards you suddenly end up on?
No, this is all uncharted waters for me, yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome, hello, and, yeah.
I think the updates to the policy make sense given the current state.
It's
of
not
the
how we'd
charter.
invent it from scratch right
Not
now,
how I would
but
do it from the
we're working
get-go,
with,
but
Yeah.
barring
I
any
agree.
charter change, I think this probably.
So is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Mary moves,
Second.
Jamie seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The next item is a request that we reconsider a matter that we first took up, I think, the first meeting in February or some time back, and which we are. You may recall, those of us here and some in the audience, that Jamie, toward the end of that discussion, invited the applicant to resubmit or to submit additional materials, which they did. Though Lee has had an opportunity to review those, and do you want to make a brief statement of that?
sure. So ironically, this, in a sense, relates to the policy we just changed, but we started this practice with this family. We've consulted with legal counsel who believes we should continue and see this case through at this level with this board. So it's a request for a waiver of a penalty for late payment of taxes. New property owner wasn't advised by their advisors that a second tax payment would be due soon after they had purchased the property. They've requested a waiver. What's before the board now, the board had decided previously not to grant it, but invited reconsideration, which is where we are this evening. They did submit additional information related to Criterion 3 medical issues, and that's what brings us to tonight, and the Josephs are on the phone.
It does seem to me to meet the Criterion 3. Do you have a dollar amount that we?
I should have that, I'm
It's only
sure.
13, I think, something.
Yes, I should
The
have had that
Josephs
with
probably
me.
know.
Yes, I'm sure the Josephs are very,
1,300 even?
Yeah. Maybe 1308, maybe.
that sounds,
We can certainly get that information to Mr. Cronin.
Well, we could, I think, we may even be able to get it faster than you.
Okay.
In any
Yeah, we
case,
don't have the numbers right now.
yeah, in any case. Seems to me, again, that this meets the criterion. The material's been provided us. Is there any motion?
Move to waive the late payment penalty in connection with the Ann and Joseph Charles application as presented pursuant to Criteria 3 of Policy 18-01.
And a second?
I'll second that.
Mike seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Mary votes nay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you to the select board. We appreciate the consideration.
The next item is to reappoint CBC members who wish to be reappointed. This is a
Goodbye, Mr. and Mrs. Joseph.
Yes.
They're gone. All right.
Thank you.
This is our routine at the expiration of appointments. We've canvassed all of the committees. Many of the chairs have made input as well. We can note at the start that we do have some vacancies, which we intend to do our best to fill at a following meeting. Two of those are on the library trust, on the Board of Trustees of the library. They have some candidates prepared. One is on the Ethics Committee, and there may be, after this process, we may describe some others. So we'll do that as a separate matter. This involves just reappointing current members. Do you want to?
Sure. I'm grateful that we have many sitting members who would like to continue their service, all of whom have been recommended highly by their respective chairs. So on the Water Commission, we have John Day and Pete Gadue. On the Ethics Committee, Bill Deming. On the Development Review Board, Ann Bentley and Michael Major. Dog Park, Bob Owens, who is the chair, so he highly recommended himself. Bike Ped Paths Committee, Jeff Zwieber and Joplin James. Tree Committee, Todd Warner. The Natural Resources and Conservation Commission, Peggy Rosenau and Fred Morgan. HPDRC, Ann Malov Suroff. We do have a member, Elaine, we do have a member who is resigning, but she is willing to continue serving until we find a replacement. How that works with the board is up to you. We have Paul Goodrich on the Veterans Committee. Cemetery Committee, Stuart Morrow, Deborah Belcher, and Jennifer Martin Brown. Parks and Recreation, Peggy Kutu and Susan McClellan. Library Trustees, John Bossia. And on the Natural Resources, didn't we say that one? I'm sorry, we have two others on Natural Resources, Michael Schramm and John Cosina, who we finally did hear from late in the game, so.
I'm sorry, the library is
John Bossia? Boscia.
At Boscia.
Thank you.
Great guy.
Right at the right time.
Hi, Lisa.
So all of these folks are willing to serve another term. They're all 3-year terms. And we will have some candidates, hopefully, for the other openings in the near future.
The HPDRC member who wants to resign, I assume we need to reappoint her and then she can resign.
Correct.
At her will, right? We don't want to.
I thought I added her onto this
That's Ann?
list.
Is it Eileen
That's,
Warner?
yes,
Okay.
Eileen Warner, thank you.
And these will serve 3-year terms,
Yes.
expiring 2023. Any questions?
Can we appoint this as a slate? Are
Yeah.
folks comfortable?
That's
with
my
that?
intention, I
Okay.
think, yeah.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of motions otherwise.
Yeah.
Are there any questions, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll catch up with you in just a minute. Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We just discussed the fact that you've got a couple of vacancies to deal with, which we anticipate at the next meeting. We know that several can't make the 24th, so we'll try to, we'll do that when it's convenient to you and them.
Okay.
Yep.
Lisa Merrill, Chair of the Trustees, and I have a torn Achilles tendon, since you're all wondering. Yeah, not a fun injury, but mostly in.
Driving foot, I've had that. You have to take it off every time.
Or you drive with your left foot.
Yeah, not a good idea.
So, yes, we have, we interviewed 9 candidates for our open positions, and we had, great candidates. It was a little bit challenging to come up with agreement on who we would like to nominate, but we have 3 nominees. I think that 1 can't come at the next meeting, but 2 can, so we can do it in 2 pieces, or we can have all 3. I'm not 100% sure if they could all come to the following one. Any preference?
Well, I would think it's whatever's convenient to you and the board, and just
Okay.
provide us the material, and we're here. So.
Okay. Do you want anything ahead of time other than their names?
Yes, there's a form that
Okay.
will,
Great if you could get me their application.
Okay.
we'll help you with that.
Okay. Okay,
With
yes,
some
I remember
background
seeing that.
information, and then a room for candidates to say a few words about their interest.
Yep.
And so we'll do them in whatever
Okay.
manner is convenient to the trustees.
All right.
So just let Lee know, and we'll proceed from there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Gee, and good luck with that. Gail?
I'd like to say on natural resources, we've been without a student member this year, and I would encourage you to put out a note encouraging students to apply.
Thank you, Gail.
I think we should do that board CBC-wide to the extent we can. I noticed that looking at the annual report that we're a little light on
Yeah,
students, and I
it's-
think I made a remark about the inception of that program, so it'd be nice to publicize that a little bit more.
Yeah, we have a student who's interested for the library, someone who's been volunteering.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Good. Yeah, that's a very good suggestion, Gail. Thank you. And congrats again.
Lee, do you know, by the way, if the schools give any sort of credit for service?
Well, it's a good question, and having launched a program that was much more full-featured in my past life, I'm hoping to reinvigorate that whole approach to student involvement on town boards, and maybe try to bring them together, do a little more mentoring, and not just appoint them and toss them off to the boards. Work more closely with a liaison at the schools. I know where I used to be, they earned their community service credit by their service, which is actually much more lengthy and in-depth than what many of the students were earning for credit. So I'd like to work on that and strengthen that whole project.
And it works the reverse, too. I'm sorry, Kate.
Oh, I was just gonna say, there could be a way to work with the Grad Challenge program. Yeah.
Then it works the, Gail?
Yeah, in my previous life, I worked in service learning at UVM and at CCV, and I would love to be part of helping to develop that mentoring program. I had offered it to some of the students who had been with us before. None of them took me up on it, but I'd love to be part of that.
Well, thank you. We'll sign you up. But it works the other way, too. At one point, we discussed the value to the school, and what I'm showing my generation, I guess, calling it civics classes, but I assume there's some consideration of public service and local politics and whatnot, and we certainly, as a body, be more than willing to serve that interest as well, perhaps to the point of partaking of activities in the school. So it'd be nice if we had a pretty well-trod path between us and CVU, and it's not limited to CVU. The community school offers some opportunities too, so.
Yeah, I wonder if we just let Adam Bunting and Scott Sebo, folks like that know, like, hey, we're looking for folks, put the word out, however you guys do that within your schools. Yeah, that'd be great.
I thought about that when I took a look at a voting booth, you know. I'm not sure how many voted, but I thought to myself, gee, I wonder if they put one up in the hallway or corridor or somewhere there for the kids to see and become familiar with and maybe understand how you operate and all the rest of it. I think there's a lot of empty space there that I know all of us would be willing to fill. So thank you, and thank you, Gail. Thank you, Lisa. Next item is the liquor license renewals. In that case, we constitute ourselves a Liquor Control Commission on a motion and vote. Is there such?
So moved.
Second.
Mary moves, Jamie seconds to convene ourselves as the Liquor Control Commission. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. You
So-
now have been introduced, Kate, to 3 memberships of 2 boards and 1 commission in about 15 minutes, so we're running out of them, though, we can assure you, so.
Never has too much power, liquor licenses.
So this evening, we have 2 businesses seeking reapproval as a first-class license. That's the permission to serve beer and wine. That would be the Bearded Frog and the Shelburne Fieldhouse. We have 2 applicants for second-class licenses, Walgreens and Route 7 Liquor and Deli. Those are for retail sales. Third-class license, Bearded Frog, and that's to be able to serve spirits, harder liquor. And again, Bearded Frog for outside consumption. The police chief has indicated no problems with any of these businesses. And this is one of those documents that if you're inclined to approve, well, either way, approved or disapproved, all of you need to sign this, please. So that's all we have for tonight. We'll keep this on the agenda over the next month or so as these roll in so that we can accommodate them as their timing arrives. It's that season.
Any questions on any of these applicants? Motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the applications as presented.
Mike moves to approve the applications as presented. Mary seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. Is there a motion to resume general session? Jamie moves.
Second.
Mary seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. Thank you. Thank you, Lee. The following item are short-term rentals. As
Each of you
a
could
way of
sign that.
introducing, this is meant to be a continuation of discussion that we're having about what could be done with what a number of our residents have identified as a problem. That is the behavioral effects largely in neighborhoods of short-term rentals, commonly called Airbnb, but that's not the only source. Lee, do you want to?
Sure. So the board had discussed this on more than one occasion. At a recent meeting, there was certainly what appeared to be a consensus agreement to ask the Planning Commission to begin looking into that. I had communicated with Dean Pierce and Jason Grignon, the chair, that they might wish to consider how and whether that would make it onto their agenda, given their other responsibilities. The board made it clear that you wanted to bring it back on the agenda for this evening, perhaps for 2 reasons. One, whether you wish to make a more formal request of the Planning Commission, but also I thought to help jumpstart the conversation, I would take the initiative and do some research just to see what's happening out there in the New England region among my planning colleagues. Doesn't seem to be a whole lot of work on this. Many communities are thinking about some form of ordinance or zoning bylaw. Of course, the rules in each state are somewhat different as to what's permissible. One city in New Hampshire decided that it would write its zoning bylaws in such a tight manner that it actually prohibited any sort of transient housing at all in residential districts. They actually won a court case on that. And it was because their rules were written in a very precise and specific manner. Other municipalities have thought about whether to allow short-term rentals, but only if the home or the property is owner-occupied. And I think the thought there is maybe that helps to address the behavioral concerns that have been raised, that if I live there, I'm probably going to be less tolerant of uncivil behavior. Of course, the question there is always the enforcement of it, because I might live in my home, owner-occupied property, but I might go away for the weekend, so I rent the house, and how is anyone even going to know that, and am I not allowed to go away on the weekend? So there are interesting enforcement questions and in general, and also in terms of equitable enforcement, how you even know. Some communities feel that this might be done by municipal ordinance, others feel it can only be done through a zoning amendment. There could theoretically be limits on how many times per year one can rent it. Another municipality prohibited larger gatherings, so they allow it, but you can't have a wedding party or some other large gathering there. Again, I don't quite know how you enforce that, because you could have a gathering of quiet people, could be a yoga retreat that makes no noise, or it could be people being rowdy and unhelpful to their neighborhood. So there's certainly a variety of ways to do it. My suggestion is always that if we want to go down this road, whichever path we take, that we be clear on what it is we hope to achieve by a rule or a regulation and how we would reasonably enforce that. Because we don't want to adopt rules we can't enforce, but we don't want to just let things get out of hand. To date, it seems like it's been an occasional issue in very particular areas. In other areas, it's completely distorted the whole housing market, because so many previously single-family homes now get bought up as rental properties solely for this purpose. And that can really change the character of a neighborhood. So that can be a very difficult problem for a community. I don't think we've seen that yet, but doesn't mean we should wait till it is happening either.
Lee, I want to applaud you for the work that you did to put this information together. It was very helpful.
Thanks.
And as far as enforcement, I personally, in thinking about this, I feel like it's something that should go before the Planning Commission. I should probably defer to Jamie and Kate on that, who have expertise in the area, because I just feel like if we're doing it here at this level, it's almost spotty, and I would like it to be considered by a group that specializes in the area and also would be able to better discern how it fits with everything else in terms of what they do and where it should be within the subdivision regulations or the zoning bylaws. But I am feeling like it is something that the town should begin to consider because of the number of complaints I've had, both formally here and then also informally, just as a select board member when being approached by people in town.
So just to clarify one point you made, are you suggesting that the planning commission should sort of take the pen,
Yes.
so to speak, with
Yeah.
the lead on this? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
would think would be appropriate, but I would
I
love to
think,
hear
I mean,
your
that was
thoughts.
my initial sense, was it probably made the most sense. My only hesitation was it sounded like the planning commission had a lot on their plate. I don't know
Yeah.
what's on their plate.
Yeah,
So I was a little concerned about, can we get it done in a timely manner, as opposed to just, this board, whether it's delegating someone to, if we end up going down an ordinance route or otherwise taking the pen on it, but maybe planning commission makes the most sense. One thing Mike and I have talked a little bit about is, do we sort of organize a more formal venue to solicit additional input? I've personally received about 10 to 15 different emails about this with very discrete, concrete examples of how this has become problematic. So in other words, 100% of the people who have outreached are advocating for action here. In some manner, they don't really have great ideas as far as how to approach it, but I do think we need to do this. I think it's timely. My sense is that we're not self-regulating within the town, so therefore we need to develop some approach that helps manage this issue. One question I had was, did we inquire with VLCT?
Yes.
Okay. And confirm that no,
They don't have any sort of list
They don't
of
have a
all
database.
municipalities who do it, and they don't have a model ordinance themselves on
Okay.
this topic. Good question, and I did check.
Were they familiar with it, Lee? I mean, is it on their radar?
They're well aware of the issue, but I didn't get any indication they plan to do any work on it in the short term, or at any
I
time.
believe the city of Burlington is considering an ordinance
are.
right now.
They are. And of course, they have and they have a full building code department to do inspections as well. So again, I'm not arguing against doing something, but they have a lot more people to manage these.
Right.
I think more than many of the zoning regulations, there's gonna be community enforcement. In other words, you're gonna get a complaint. This is something unlike, when there's a building permit and somebody's violating the permit. A lot of neighbors don't really know, right? And the only way to know is to have the zoning administrator do a drive-by and see, oh, house isn't built yet, permit's a year and a half old, or whatever the violation might be. But when it comes to having people use their homes for a transient use, neighbors are gonna report it. And it gives us, the club, to say, you're in violation, you can't, or whatever the zoning, I'm in favor of having one where it has to be, if you want an Airbnb, it has to be owner occupied. That was the original intent behind it after all. So, people will report to you, my neighbor is using, I realize it means more work, but I also think it helps protect our communities. That's just my gut reaction, uneducated.
I think right now we're sort of stuck, we can't do anything.
Right.
When people are calling in, if they are, then we're just telling them to resolve it, right, on their own, be a good neighbor, which 95% of the time, hopefully that works, but there are locations in town where it's just become a bigger issue. So I think they're looking to this board to help provide a solution.
Yeah, unless it's violating the state's noise ordinance, which kicks in after 11 PM, in which case the police can enforce against the noise. But that's not addressing the collection of other concerns that have been raised.
My sense is I think we should be found to be moving substantially on solving the problem. Respecting the fact that there's still research to be done and alternatives to be considered. No, but I think we should be found tonight in a formal way to be addressing this problem, so that not to look good or curry favor with our fellow residents, but when the question comes, I'd rather be able to say to a neighbor, we've taken the steps to get involved in solving this. And it is complicated. It is a question of adequate enforcement. But at this point, we don't have that resolved. So tonight, I'd like us to formally establish our interest in resolving this problem in some form, whether ordinance or zoning. Secondly, I wonder if we could, or a delegation of us could go to the Planning Commission next meeting and make a presentation which would benefit several of you, and I don't know, well, you're the experts, but maybe that would be a demonstration of our resolve and a willingness to share what has to be eventually a cooperative activity here. I mean, I can't see us doing independently of them, nor necessarily they independently of us. My third concern is that there's going to be an expectation of time frame here, maybe driven by the summer. That's a sort of seat of the pants expectation. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I don't think we have time on our side. On the other hand, I don't think we should be driven into something that is not well thought through. But I think this is a good time, in short, to make a formal decision that we are going to pursue a remedy to this problem and provide along the way forum for those who've experienced it, as well as those who argue differently. Owners who feel owner-occupied is not going to be satisfactory, and those forums could be here at our next meeting. They could be in a presentation we make to the Planning Commission jointly with them. They could take shape at the SBPA panel next week. I mean, we have a number of opportunities to announce our resolve. But I'd be more comfortable tonight if we put that in formal terms and had a motion which directed you and requested the Planning Commission officially to take this matter up.
I know Dean Pierce is here, and he might have
I mean,
insight to offer.
I'm interested in what Mike and Kate.
Yeah, I
think
wanted to hear
about the
Mike and
issue as
Kate
well
first, Dean,
before
if you
we
don't mind.
Invite Dean up.
I asked actually at the meeting in which we discussed this for information, and my request was met with a lot of emails from people who had read that I was looking for information. So I have a nice, I do have a one-sided picture because all of the people that wrote to me were suggesting we needed to do something. So I am definitely interested in getting a clear picture of what's going on. And whether we formally indicate our resolve or whether verbally showing our resolve, I think we should resolve ourselves to do something. One thing that occurs to me that could be done relatively quickly and would kind of act in the way that you've suggested would just to be find out how many short-term rentals we have in town. And I wonder
How could we do that?
if we can do that. Is there a way to get that information?
You could go on Airbnb and punch in Shelburne and see what comes up.
It's a great job for a high school student on the planning commission. What, so is there a way? That's so curious.
Jump in here before you comment.
Sure.
Dean, would you?
I don't mean to discourage the board from taking any action, and I'm not sure if the email I had sent to Lee concerning the agenda for the upcoming meeting was something that was in your packet. But I want the board to know that the chair of the Planning Commission does have this issue on his radar. In developing the agenda for the upcoming meeting, it was really a toss-up between hitting the members with what would be the beginning of a new major project or to work on something another topic. And in the end, the decision was made to go with that other topic, but he is certainly aware of it. And I just wanted the board members to know that. As for doing an inventory, I would say that in the past, we have looked at the various sites. It isn't always as simple a matter as entering in a town, because some people we know have had their addresses incorrectly listed. In some cases, the specific address is not registered, is not available until you actually make a reservation. So there are some shadow locations, or have been in the past. So unless you go straight to the vendors.
Do you have an estimate?
Well, I have a recollection that at different times in the past, there were 6 that were listed on Airbnb. The VRBO seemed to have consistently been fewer. I have not looked in quite some time.
Well, here's a question for Lieutenant Thomas. Would the SPD have any seat of the pants sense of how many locations appear to be rentals from calls? Or just observation, patrol observation? I mean, would there be any sense in the department of how many we're looking at? 5, 15?
As far as Airbnb go,
Rentals, short-term rentals that had large
I know about 4, but as far as responding to calls, no.
No. Well, we certainly could solicit that information from the public by just asking. No?
Yeah, but that's just at one point in time, right?
Yeah.
You can always decide to Airbnb or house, so.
True.
My
Yeah.
thought is there will be more, right? At this point in time, maybe it's only 10 to 15.
Yeah.
Or it's 50 for all we know. I have no idea.
We have no idea.
Airbnb is telling me there's 48 places
Right.
to stay, but I do know that Airbnb will go to other surrounding towns like Heinsberg, Charlotte, so it's hard to say. I think that's what Dean was saying earlier.
I'm just wondering whether
Orangeville.
one thing that you might think about is asking people to register if they're going to have an Airbnb. And I don't know that it would give you 100% compliance, but it might be one way to sort of solicit the information and let people think that you're aware of it.
Registration is one. I think we're at the stage we're discussing at this point the stage scale of the magnitude of the problem, and more so where, it may be more importantly, where the problem is occurring, and in what neighborhood, and what seems to be the attraction of that neighborhood. I mean, those kinds of understandings are going to be pretty key here. Now, Kate, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I guess I have a kind of different take on this. And I know we're going to be speaking about economic development in the next agenda item, but I see this as actually quite interrelated potentially with that. And I'm wondering, because of the enforcement challenges, I definitely think, I like the idea of registering and some degree of regulation, but I'm wondering if we can use a more carrot approach rather than a stick approach. We are, a town where we have the 3 top tourism venues in the States. We have a lot of high-end weddings here. People come here. And so there's, and Burlington, South Burlington are racing each other to build new hotels, right? So there's demand. So it's not a surprise that this is happening, but I'm wondering if we can kind of co-opt the problem in a sense and turn it into something that we can leverage as part of the Shelburne brand. And I think registering could be a really wonderful way to do that. A friend of mine has come up with a kind of, I think, a really interesting idea, which is this idea of stay with us in Shelburne. And as that, if you think of something with the SBPA, on the people coming here, where can I stay? What can I do? We want people to stay here. We want all the people who come to the farms and the museum, we want them to stay here. We want them to walk into the village. We want them to spend money and eat here and, just do everything that we can to get them to spend lots of money here. And so, Airbnb could be part of that, but it would, and that might, I think it would be more advantageous to get somebody who is a visitor coming to the museum than maybe somebody who's coming here for, I don't know, a big event at Higher Ground or something like that. Yeah. So it might get a sort of a patron that is more in keeping with, sort of the town brand and the cultural institutions that we have here and what we offer, and also most importantly, what's in keeping with the neighborhood. So I don't know how all that comes together yet, but I'm just thinking about it through a little bit of a different lens.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Stacy must be your head must be alive with
baskets for
with possibilities because we don't want to disrupt venues all over the place. And but I'm a great believer that there is some weight to a board decision by vote that announces to the community we are serious about resolving the problem. And it may reach the ears of those who are part of the problem, who may become aware that this is not the Wild West in the coming months, and who may have their own suggestions, which we would invite about if they are going to pursue rentals as an economic matter. They may have their own suggestions about protecting that franchise and at the expense of regulation. So I'm encouraging something formal because I do think as a matter of public presentation, it's important that the Select Board has said this is something we're going to pursue with cooperating with the Planning Commission or jointly with them. And I think we've already identified a number of questions here that we need to carefully consider, research, and think about obtaining data about in the coming weeks. So, your sense, Lee?
No, I think that all makes a lot of sense. At the same time, I think we need to help manage expectations that, presuming the board does take a formal action, does meet with the Planning Commission, and if the Planning Commission even has time on its plate to help work on it, that it doesn't mean we wave our magic wand and 2 meetings from now we have a new ordinance in place. That even if we had an ordinance ready to go tonight, it takes time to adopt that. So we may commit to working on it as a community, but I think people need to realize it does take time to do it right and then work through the process.
Can I ask a couple? Do you know, Lee, in your research, if there's been any kind of tiered approach to regulating? So, say, single-family homes have to be owner-occupied and condos, apartments, townhouses not, or something like that.
Attached facilities.
Attached, yeah. Have people broken it up in this way?
I haven't seen one yet, but it may well be out there. It's been more tiered, I think, in terms of layers of regulation.
Right.
Some, for example, as suggested here, do a license and registration. It's hard to know what that actually accomplishes in terms of addressing the concerns that you've all been hearing, other than hopefully you know about it. But if I run one quietly and don't register it and don't pay rooms and meals tax, who's going to know? That's
Right.
the tricky part of it. Doesn't mean it's not able to be overcome. And then others simply say, as Portsmouth, New Hampshire just had zoning written so tightly that it was clearly prohibited in any residential district. Whether that's a good idea, some people, it allows them to stay in their home because they can earn some extra income or they can pay their property taxes. So I'm not advocating any position, but one approach is you write a new rule that just makes it out of bounds in any residential neighborhood. There's probably a whole host of middle grounds, and then, of course, the licensing that doesn't actually regulate. It just says, if you have it, you got to fill out a form, pay a fee, and by the way, you have to have your exit signs and meet the state health code and pay your rooms and meals tax and all the rest of that.
I mean, the threats to affordability are pronounced. I mean, we felt as a body that the achievement of the changes they made with accessory structures was a boon to affordability. We talked about that, especially in our community. So my sense is that for our own purposes, maybe our retreat could feature this. And by invitation, different voices and opinions from town could come, and we make it a large part of our meeting.
Yeah.
It certainly has an influence on the goals and objectives that we just agreed to. I mean, we're going to have to, spin a little bit there and recognize that we're proposing that Lee spend more time than was anticipated.
Well,
and,
it's really more planning commission, right? We're not asking you to sort of take the...
But I think in terms of a deliverable downstream, we'll have some expectations that in a period of time, we're going to want to see something in some working draft form, and that's going to take, I think, a considerable effort on the part of both Lee and Dean. So it's the town office impact for sure. So again, my sense is if we just do a simple, we're resolved to address this problem as it's been introduced to us, and sort of a polite stay tuned, I think that would be a good step tonight.
So we're thinking formal direction to the planning commission to
initiate
evaluation of
a remedy to the problem as we understand it, subject to better understandings as we...
I appreciate what you're trying to accomplish, but I think framing it as terms of needing a remedy to a problem, I don't even know that I'm not discounting any of the information that I've received. It seems like we have a problem, but I don't want to, I would just like sort of a scoping and trying to
address the problem that's been introduced to
address
us.
the issues that have been introduced about sort of the consequences of short-term housing in Shelburne.
And that's what, the public hearings would allow
Hopefully
that discussion.
Yeah. I would like to hear from people that run these Airbnbs. I'd like to know, we have a variety, I'm assuming, from owner-occupied to I bumped into somebody who was buying a couch for one and, that I didn't even know. So I'm just sort of trying to figure out what's going on, and it would be good to, I think, task the Planning Commission with figuring out what's an appropriate response to the issue.
Have you received any input from anyone saying, hey, this is a crazy idea, this is not a problem?
No, I haven't, no. All the information I've gotten is we need to do something about this.
That's what I've seen in the Shelburne News. There were a couple letters to the editor, I think.
Well, I think the publicity should generate a property manager who might have some important things to say.
I agree. Which might be a good benefit.
Yeah, and next week, I know the SBPA invited me to be on that panel. I'm not sure how many others of us are, but that might be an opportunity to just simply reprise this discussion and just say, we're pretty committed to seeing what can be done to minimize these effects as they've been introduced to us, and in an orderly way, and we're going to depend upon the Planning Commission to take the lead. So,
I think Kate's point about how this is nuanced is important, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
There is messaging around this, and
absolutely.
I think how we position this will help the overall outcome down the
Because
road.
that
So
stay
it doesn't need to be
program-
heavy-handed. I'm not suggesting it needs to be a club, I think, in your words, but how we go about it is important. So, but I do think there is some urgency to it as well. That's why I'm somewhat hesitant to just wait and sort of conduct a lot of hearings, and maybe next year there starts to be a draft of something that may get a public hearing, which I don't think is going to satisfy a lot of folks who are going to have to deal with another.
I wonder if a survey would be helpful to get public input on this, because, I know I've been on this board about 5 minutes, but I have heard from a few people that they like the idea of encouraging people to come and stay, but they want it to be done in a certain kind of way. And I know my one of my kids went to St. Lawrence University in a very small town, Canton, New York, and for Parents' Weekend, there were people who had, there's a list of residences who would put people up, because it was so well attended, or graduations and things. And this was an opportunity for people to make a little extra income. And, but it was all through the university, you were sort of vetted. I don't know how they did it, but we stayed in places several times when it just wasn't feasible to get a hotel room, or we had too many people.
Even if we started with a survey of the neighborhood associations, which would say 1 for 40, 1 for 30, who have policies. In our case, there's a written policy about short-term rentals, and get a kind of a feel for what they do. So what that population is what you can do in those areas, and maybe seek some help in the community. I'm sure someone at the farms is involved in finding housing, maybe as well. The museum's got some expertise and do our data gathering in support of the Planning Commission. Okay, is anybody?
I don't know what our action item is right now.
I'd enjoy a motion that says the Select Board has determined this evening that it will pursue this problem as it's been presented in the most timely way possible, or something along those lines. We're not promising any output or any outcome at any particular time, but we're demonstrating a resolve. And maybe even just to say the Select Board by this is resolved to address this problem in an orderly way with the cooperation of the Planning Commission. Will that do?
Are we gonna, is everybody okay with this? I detect a little hesitance with the idea of making it a motion. Is that setting a bad precedent, as though we need to signal our commitment to every issue that comes before us?
I would like some type of formal direction to the Planning Commission, so that this doesn't, so we're not here 3 or 4 months later,
I
and the
agree
Planning
with
Commission
that,
saying,
yeah.
well, we never really got formal direction from you. So we thought you were interested, but we couldn't really tell because
So a
Jamie
motion
said this, or
that resolves to address the issue through or in conjunction with the work of the Planning Commission.
right,
I would
and
resolve to ask the Planning Commission to take up the question.
yes.
That's what I was going to suggest, that maybe you ask the Planning Commission to investigate further and hear from people on both sides.
That sounds good. Would you like to make the motion, Lisa?
You can make it 3. You can make it 3 empty seats, and we'll happily find room for you.
So I would resolve to ask the Planning Commission, or direct the Planning Commission to begin to investigate the issue and come to some sort of resolution.
I'll second that motion.
Made and seconded. Any other discussion? Any discussion? Tom?
Tom Tompkins, Falls Road. I'm very glad to see you're paying attention to this issue. I have no problems on my own, but I'd like to point out that, assuming that these Airbnbs are renting out more than a couple times a year, they're running a business. So essentially for the neighbors, you have put a small motel right next to them, and, really that's probably illegal.
Thank you, Tom. Is there any further discussion? I'm going to make just one comment. At the town meeting dinner, one of the slators came by the table, and this happened to be the conversation, and was recounting the impacts on that person's neighborhood in Burlington over a recent period of time. I think the person said 4 or 5 years, where there were significant changes in the neighborhood based on the economic opportunity these represented and the loss of affordable housing. I mean, a demonstrable loss of affordable housing. So I think down the road we're going to discover there is more going on here than.
Yeah, the situation in Burlington's been well publicized. In 7 days. So if anyone's interested in learning more about what they're dealing with.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Dean, we're going to appreciate your willingness to summarize this in some fashion for the benefit of the Planning Commission. We hope. Thank you. Appreciate it. The next item is economic development. This, again, is an introductory piece intended to start us on the path of defining the program that we're going to follow this year, and that we, in the initial budget allocation, anticipated would be a multi-year venture. And Lee has provided us with some of his initial thoughts. Do you want to pick up from there, Lee?
Sure, thanks. So, as often happens when a certain amount of money is allocated for a particular purpose, those interested in that topic get interested and excited and want to know how we're going to spend it and start making suggestions on how to spend it. And my sense is that it's helpful to start thinking about those things early, but not to rush into any quick decisions, because I think it's important to analyze what it is we think we're actually going to achieve. And in many people's minds, economic development means you hire somebody and 6 months later there's 5 new businesses in town. I'm not sure that's quite how it works. I think economic development is a multifaceted topic that involves building relationships with people. It involves going out there and talking to people who run businesses today, why they started them here, how they work, what challenges they've faced, what opportunities they've faced. Are there synergies missing? Do they know people of complementary businesses that just somebody didn't think, oh yeah, I have a friend who has a business that would really blend well with 3 others. We ought to give them a call. Talking to realtors, talking to landowners, and just get the lay of the land more. I think it also involves strengthening our ties, as we've begun to do as a board and a management over the year, strengthening ties with local nonprofits. You talked about stay to play or whatever it was. I think there are ways we could strengthen relationships between the big and small entities in town. One example was, I mentioned in my write-up, I had a visit recently from the directors of the Shakespeare Festival, and they apparently come to Shelburne and they do discrete performances in various places, and then they go away. And they were curious, are there ways along the same lines, are there ways we can build something here and make Shelburne the home of the Shakespeare Festival? And that's why I suggested, what if they were one of the new businesses and they came and did a 3-minute skit here to publicize what might be coming next weekend, or come dance around at the farmer's market on a Saturday and they could be the performers, or do something silly in the seventh inning stretch of a Little League game. Ways to just create more opportunities for strengthening what we have and building on our assets. It's not always just about bringing something new and forgetting that there are people who've invested their emotional lives and their family lives and their financial lives in businesses that already exist. So I think it's important that we take our time, figure out how best to spend a very small amount of money. As you know, I've already reached out to several economic development specialists in other municipalities around the region just to learn about who they are and what they do and how it works and how they have helped good things happen in their communities. So my sense is we have 25,000. It's not a whole lot of money. Maybe the best way is we find a consultant to work with us on a very part-time basis to help analyze strengths and weaknesses and opportunities. But I think a lot of it is going to be our time and effort and not just spending money to build signs or hire somebody and expect great things to happen overnight.
Jamie?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I don't think anyone's expectation was we're going to spend 25K and sort of solve all our problems, so point taken there for sure. I'm a little hesitant to get into a broader discussion about economic development. I think I'd prefer to just give my 2 cents on how I'm thinking about the 25K. I agree with you. I do think the 25K could be well spent on some type of independent contractor relationship with an economic development consultant. I do still have a view that having a part-time person here in the building 2 days a week, if I don't even know what 25K would get us, but if there were some presence here where you could just start to get to know the organization and the town and become familiar with it, there will be a big learning curve. But I think there's an investment in that individual if we find the right person, which is always the tricky question. So I think both of those options are attractive to me to consider.
Mary?
Yeah, I agree with Jamie completely. I think there are some people, I think, in our community who could be helpful. I'm thinking of Bruce Cipher, I think is retired from CEDO, might have some, sort of done the rodeo a few times. But I also feel like there are a number of things that we could do that would enhance Shelburne for all of us residents. One thing I think that's, I really support the idea of enhancing the businesses that are up in the, is it called the industrial park? The
Shelburne Green?
Shelburne Green. I'm sorry, it gets late, sorry, Gail. Thank you. I'm supportive of changing up Shelburne Green a little bit so that there could be, for example, more signage for them. Their signage is specifically limited, and I think that was an old idea that is not relevant any longer. I also feel like there's businesses up there, and there's a pretty big parking lot. It's asphalted parking lot. They close on the weekend. There's no reason why we shouldn't have food trucks up there on Saturdays. From, in the summer from, 4 to 7 or something like that. It wouldn't be loud, but you would get families there easily. And, simple ideas like that don't really cost money. It probably makes somebody's job a little harder. Like, I'm thinking of maybe Betsy to organize a food truck kind of thing. And I actually have talked to her about it, and she made it pretty clear how hard that is. Food truck wars are apparently a thing. So it's a little more complicated than meets the eye, but I do think it's worth working on something like that. One thing that distinguishes, I think, Shelburne from, say, Burlington, Burlington has its food trucks. I couldn't go there. A, I'm too old, and B, it's too crowded. But Shelburne, I think, has, and I could be wrong about this, but it's just my impression, as more of a reputation as a family community with people with their kids and that kind of thing. And so doing something like that that's smaller and a little earlier where you can bring your kids and hang out a little bit. There's Teddy Bear had a couple of concerts on their fields at one point, and I think it was because they got moved off from the Shelburne Museum, but there's so much room up there to do things. So it just seems to be an untapped resource right there. So something like that I would really favor. And I'm going on way too long, I'm sorry.
I think what you're referring to is the regulatory reform
Yeah.
pillar
wanted to
that
bring that
we've
up,
talked a lot about, and, we could sort of get into that discussion if we want, but I agree, I think we need to dig in on that right away and
Yeah.
start thinking about those.
I agree. No, I definitely think we need to fast track our approach to regulatory reform, but it'd be nice to dovetail that with a part-time position of somebody who could work between the various constituencies without
Stakeholders
overburden. And kind of get good input and also think about good resolutions. I mean, everybody, we all have these great ideas, and I'd like to,
Right.
yeah, and I'd like to hear from, I think, a consultant to hear what they consider. But I mean, one thing I'm wondering is, in terms of a part-time or even consulting help, and I don't mean this to prejudge anything, but does the 25 that we're putting forward sort of signal a desire to continue putting that forward? So if we're going to solicit some help from a part-time person, are we expecting we want you to come in for 6 months? We want you to come in for a potential year? So I like the idea of a
complicated, yeah.
person in the offices as a kind of liaison and facilitator and sort of, a point of contact for all the various constituencies. So, 25 is not much. Can we do some consulting work in conjunction with that? I'd like to.
I think we'd be surprised if you put a job description together that is sort of a light touch of what Colchester and some other municipalities have. I would bet you would get some candidates who are looking for 2 days a week.
Yeah.
2.5 days a week work in that area, and you'll have some very talented people come in. I do think it does signal a longer-term investment, which I very much support and which we talked about during the budget sessions. This is just sort of our toe in the water as far as dollars go, in my opinion.
The other thing I would like to see before the next budget is a set of sort of expectations for what defines success. Not immediate and not, huge, but just so we understand, like, this is what it would mean to have accomplished something significant and reasonable with the 25. So I think that's important too. Even if we just, I love, Lee, that you're making all these connections, but I kind of wonder, like, how much time do you really have to be visiting all the businesses? But if we had somebody who actually had literally made the rounds to all the businesses and introduced and said, I'm in the office and what do you need? I wanted to ask our guest tonight, like, how can we help you? What do you need from us? So just having a contact, a point, I think in the office would be really helpful for that.
I happen to know somebody in the area who would probably jump at the opportunity for this. The thing we need to be careful about is, and again, not prejudging a structure, if we hire a consultant, we can do it part-time, there's an hourly rate, and that's the end of it. If we bring somebody in as a part-time employee, it changes the whole cost context, because now you're talking benefits and workers' comp and a whole constellation of other expenses that eat away quickly at the 25. So not prejudging the structure, but it's another piece of that puzzle as to how to make the best use of it.
I would think this year a consultant makes sense, since we are just putting our toe in the water. Maybe the consultant would say, you need to hire somebody. Or maybe the consultant would have other ideas that we haven't thought of. So maybe start there. I love the idea of hiring somebody. I've been advancing that since I got this chair, but maybe for this, it is kind of hard to say, hi, I want to hire you, and hopefully the select board will put another, line item in for your salary next year. That's kind of hard, because somebody might just have a job for a year in that event, right?
I think that somebody could, on a consulting basis, just for 1 year, come up with what I think is maybe the most important first step, which would be, as Lee has written, a welcoming approach. What is that? What would that look like here? And what could that be? And how could every single member of the staff, every elected and appointed official be kind of empowered to project that to a visitor. I think we should all become ambassadors of Shelburne and the opportunities that are here. We all need to become cheerleaders. And I think a consultant could start to frame what that might look like.
Yeah, I see three functions, one of which, and each of these is demanding in its own way, and we have to be cognizant not only of our own time and energy, but Lee's and staff as well. No, I see regulatory reform, which, for the nature of it and as a matter of institution, we should be principally all about. Certainly to the point of initiating what we think the roster of reform looks like. I see a readiness, because I think Mike and Jamie make a good point about keeping a long-term horizon to this. I think establishing a readiness to do something is pretty important at this stage, even while we're imagining some benefit. I mean, we're basically going on faith that there's going to be a benefit to this. And while I agree we should be more specific about that benefit, and that should redound to what we're choosing to do, I do think there's a stage of readiness that we need to take. We have no organized approach, and the whole idea here was to get started with that. No, that doesn't discount SBPA or anything else going on, because as a third prong in a minute, I think a constant amount of interesting and innovative activity, the new businesses, the panels, turning the retreat in part to a forum, we can keep doing that as a matter of our own course. But I think that second prong ought to have to do with establishing the function. In some way, putting the function in the town office, making it part of Shelburne's service delivery. We have an economic development function. And the only other thought I've had, Dean unfortunately has helped me with this before, and I'm back again a year later to ask him again, but at one point, and you and Kate may be familiar with it, something called IHOC was done, a really brilliant piece to me that gauged business opportunities in a very professional way, and not just on Route 7, but gave all kinds of statistical evidence to suggest what sectors were most promising, and you provided me eventually appointed some copy. That seemed to me to be a template. That seemed to be a set of directions that somebody could follow to get from here to there. And that might be a consultant figure who may in turn turn into a more a budgetable position by fall. That might be a figure that grows in the job. That might be someone who then suggests a variety of contractual arrangements with folks like SCORE and whatnot. But I think that middle prong has got to be we establish a function. And to me, that translates to head count in some form. So the question, it seems to me at the moment, is how far will that 25 go, or some percentage of it, maybe 15, so that we reserve some monies to think about some other things, or 20. And my sense is that from here, we might ask Kate and Stacy, who just left, and a number of people who got an interest in this, to give us some ideas, to field at our next meeting about a job description.
Is it, I don't know enough about consulting in this way. I don't know much about consulting at all. But is it feasible that a consultant could have a sort of staff-like position, or be in the office working a couple days a week in conjunction? Yeah, I mean, I would favor something like that. I think I think what you've said is kind of what I envision. I mean, somebody
having
that's,
someone sitting at home drafting. a
Yeah,
study
right, that's
doesn't
not-
feel
that's not
good to
what
me.
we-
It doesn't feel right.
Right.
This is very much roll up your sleeves, on the ground kind of
Yeah.
work, developing those relationships and talking to every business about
Yeah.
what's not working,
Yeah.
right? The same thing we did at the forum, but in
Yeah.
a much more systematic,
and
organized way.
then working between Dean and the
Yes.
various
And the
committees and the
assumption is
departments.
this
and
person, this function would be lodged in the manager's office as a start. It may morph into someday a department, but the point is it would come out of Lee's office, so the necessary authorities would derive from him.
Yeah.
Right, and I would
You know,
yield to Lee as far as what the optimal structure is, right? I don't really see that as
Well,
our
this will
job
be an
to
evolving-
develop. I think we can provide input, but ultimately it's your organization, so. But I do think having someone in the office is so
I think that's
important
a
for this
step we
kind
need
of
to
work.
take. And, we want to give some sense of a couple of meetings from now that we would ask Lee to come back with a draft job description, and meanwhile, we'll ask SB, get the word around with what people think. There's a lot of expertise out there. There are consultants out there who are familiar with this world, and consider.
I think over the course of the next couple of weeks, maybe we just start to develop whether it's a job description and a scope of what that engagement might look like, right? At a very high level, even if we just start knocking out bullet points on here's what we would want that individual to focus on, right? And then we can always build it out as needed.
Because July 1 will come soon enough.
Oh, believe me, I know.
You know, when the money's
We wanna
ready.
hit the ground running.
Yeah, when
be
the money,
ready.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's our date, right?
Yeah, I mean, the money becomes available, and we probably would be, it'd be a little difficult to commit to too much in terms of headcount until then, but we don't want to wait until July 1 and find ourselves, looking at Labor Day, so.
But there's a lot of work to do, in
Yeah.
addition to
Yeah.
that 25K, as I think
Yeah.
That's the point that I think Lee was trying
Yes,
to
it
make.
was. Yeah, there's a big body of work here for us to.
So are you comfortable with,
Yes.
Great.
Get to work
coming
on
back?
this.
We keep it as a routine item on the agenda, and keep moving, and we invite all the input from the community and interest that that we can inspire. So, Gail?
Just in the context of this discussion, you mentioned earlier the SBPA meeting that's going to happen on the 19th from 7:30 to 9 in the morning. There'll be a panel of some business owners, new, not so new, and hopefully older, as well as Jerry on that panel. And I would urge you all to come and hear the ideas that those people have. They've been instructed to look positively towards the future and not to be complaining about the past, and to just come up with ideas, and then we'll be soliciting ideas from the audience as well. It's going to be on the 19th, 7:30 to 9 in the morning, and it's going to be held at the new Vermont Design Center that's just north of Archie's Grill, where the furniture store used to be. And there'll be refreshments and time for people to share ideas, and you may get a different audience than you get here. So I'd urge you to come and just listen to what people think about. Yeah.
Okay, Lee, does this make sense to you?
Yes, thank you.
Dean, if you can help me with that, I'd really appreciate it. My note says LOHAS.
You've used
LOHAS.
Yeah, you've used that. You've used some acronyms. There was a market study, essentially, that was done of the village that was conducted by Doug Kennedy, who has worked out of Norwich, and he did that as a component of the village study that looked at a few different issues.
I know, and of all the things that I've seen, this was to me the most helpful and useful and inspirational.
Yeah, and it was a small part of a project that I think wasn't more than 30 or 35K. So the possibility, if the decision had been to do a study, I think a study comparable to that in the 15K range is a possibility.
would you, Lee, could we make arrangements to get that to the, around? It's a really interesting, well, professionally done, And I'm not suggesting we repeat it, but it may be a good basis for the further discussion, so. Okay? We're, got a minute left, Mike.
Actually,
Okay, we're ready?
We're way ahead of schedule.
No, we're not.
No,
Oh, according to
right.
this clock, we are.
Yeah. I'm going to change the
Oh, I
clock.
thought Mike was going to give us a gratuitous, it's half an hour, so I guess not. All right, any other discussion? Hearing none. The next item is an expenditure of Select Board discretionary funds, recognizing Colleen Parker's service. You've been provided the specifics. Is there a motion to that effect?
So, let's see, we're moving to approve the expense. What's that, right?
Yes.
Of the discretionary funds, right?
Correct.
Okay, in the amount of, help me with the math, guys. 350, Two lawyers doing the math.
$680.80.
six what?
680.80?
No, $630.80.
Oh, no, sorry. No. 350, yeah.
Move to authorize the expenditure of Select Board discretionary funds, recognizing Colleen Parker's services in the amount of
$630.80. Jamie moves.
I'll second.
Mike seconds. This is, these are monies, Kate, that are allocated to us for these general kinds of purposes, memorials and gifts and so on. But we make it's a public matter of approving the allocation, and that's what we're about right now, so.
Yep, so it was $250 to the library, $100 for the gift certificate, and the balance for plaque.
Yep. Discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Our next item is an executive session, which will ultimately involve Lieutenant Thomas as well as Lee, and is Peter going to join us?
It's up to him. I think he'd rather not this evening.
We have a two-step process, as everybody's familiar with. Will someone...
I move pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313 to find that premature general public knowledge of the town's position in a pending labor relations agreement with employees would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Mary so moves. Jamie seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
I would also move pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313 to enter into executive session to evaluate the town's position in a pending labor relations agreement with employees, and to invite the town manager and also Lieutenant
Thomas.
Mike Thomas. Well, I know the name, I just want to make sure I got the title right. Mike Thomas to attend.
Second.
Mary moves, Jamie seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We do not anticipate returning with any action to be taken or any announcement of any kind, and we will likely adjourn upon our finish. So we thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.